Hello YouTube, Martin here from Don't Fret and welcome back. It is Sunday the somethingth of November and I've had one hell of a weekend. Yesterday I recorded a video how I talked about the 3 things that really made a difference between my funk on Friday and my empowerment on Saturday, and I'm very glad that I was able to maintain those positive habits into today. So I'd strongly recommend going back and checking out this video. But also this weekend, I've come up with the help of my partner Rebecca, come up with a framework that will help support men in their emotional growth the same way that I helped myself over the past few years. And that's the thing that I want to give back now that I'm well underway with my own recovery. So let's take a look. So back when I'd had my breakthrough moment and I decided that the amount of pain that I was experiencing on a daily basis was no longer something that I was willing to tolerate within my life, I started to explore different ideas to see what I could find out, to see what could empower me and how I could live differently. As I was uncovering this, I was discovering that a lot of my issues were kind of male-related issues. My inability to open up, my inability to show affection, to show love, and thus receive it in return. And on my quest to find out more information, I was confronted with the most garbage, hyper-masculine content that does way more harm than good. And if you take a search on YouTube, you will be able to see this. I've talked about it on a previous video, but it's all of this kind of hyper-masculine stuff where you go up into the mountains, you slay elk with your bare hands, you get a 6-pack, you lift weights, you get a Lamborghini, and the world all of a sudden becomes your oyster, which is completely and utter bollocks. That is masculinity from the 1980s that is no longer welcome in modern society. It's what creates violence, it's what creates pain, it's how there is gun-toting Americans running around with flak jackets at the moment going Trump, 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 Trump. That's where this hyper-masculine pained man comes from. And let me tell you, hurt men are the individuals that hurt themselves and others more than any other. So coming out of pain is absolutely crucial. And I've spent some time thinking about the last 2 years and the things that have worked mostly for me and the discussions that I've had with other people, and broken it down into 4 concepts and 4 areas that we can hone in on to live a better life. And I'm calling it the Man Cave. And it's called the Man Cave because CAVE is the acronym that we're using as the criteria for this framework. And let's start with the first letter, C, connection. It's probably the one thing at the core of my entire recovery has been in connection. And now, connection can come in a lot of forms. And a lot of groups and content these days is promoting sharing with other men. And I'm not disputing the value in that in any way, shape or form. I'm actually currently looking for a men's mastermind group for people to share this important work with. But what I've actually realized is there is more power in diversity. There's so much more power in diversity. And as someone that's come from a background of basically hanging around with people that look like me, right? White males. That's been my core group for years. And now that I've embraced diversity within my connections, within my friendship groups of members of the LGBTQIA+ community, or different people of color, trans people, like that, being curious to understand someone else's story that is different to you creates a bond, a connection, which I can tell you is one of the most powerful things that you can have for liberating your own emotions. So number 1, connection. Number 2, acceptance. Now, acceptance also comes in two different forms. The first is acceptance of your circumstance, acceptance of who you are. There's this thing called the Stockdale paradox, which is taking a brutally hard and accepting look at your circumstances right this moment, whilst maintaining an unwavering hope for the future. So being able to accept your lot in life, your current circumstances, gives you that framework with which to move forward. But it's also accepting of oneself, one's personality, one's character habits, one's abilities, one's skill sets, and accept those parts of you which are strengths and those parts of you which are weaknesses. That way you can hone in with a strong growth mindset and start to develop those. The third one, V, is vulnerability. A couple of years ago, I wasn't a fan of Brené Brown, and people asked me questions around vulnerability, like, is it important for a leader to be vulnerable? And I was like, oh, you know what, I'm sick of this conversation of vulnerability. It's just a buzzword that's floating around leadership circles, particularly on LinkedIn, that just doesn't mean anything. And I still stand by that in a way, but in a very different way, because then when I started to get into Brené Brown's work, you kind of realize that courage can't exist without vulnerability. So vulnerability has to come first. One of the most courageous things you can do, and if you're a man watching this and you're scared of vulnerability, or if you're in some way saying, oh no, vulnerability's for sissies, I tell you what, it's the other way round. If you are too scared to be vulnerable, then you, my friend, are the coward. So vulnerability first, and courage will follow. And the fourth one, E, stands for esteem, or more specifically, self-esteem, which is our very character. It's how we hold the integrity of our personality and our word. I strongly recommend, for those that haven't read it, read the 4 Agreements. And rule number 1 of the 4 Agreements is be impeccable with your word. It's something that I've struggled with significantly over the years. It's this whole idea of when I say something, it gets done. Being a man of your word, holding that level of credibility, integrity, congruence, and consonance rather than dissonance. So that what you believe resonates with the way that you act, and what you say resonates with your actions. So number 4 is self-esteem. And that, my friends, is C.A.V.E. I will be covering this a lot more in future videos, where we'll take each one, break it down into different areas, and try to give you tips on how you can take each one of these and start developing them, growing them within your life, and making that path to emotional freedom. But that's it for me today. Adios. See you soon. Bye.